السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, the master of the day of judgment. I bear witness and testimony to the oneness of Allah, to His magnificence, His omnipotence, His might, His glory, to His being the creator and sustainer of all things, the giver of life, the guider of hearts, the master of the day of judgment. And I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is His servant and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon all those who choose to tread in his path until the last day. It is said that on one occasion, a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam comes to the messenger of God to admit that he drinks alcohol. And when he comes and he speaks about his struggle in drinking alcohol, other of the companions start to speak ill of this man, but the Prophet ﷺ says to them that don't say that, he loves God and His messenger. On another occasion, a companion comes to the Prophet ﷺ to admit that he has committed zina. And the Prophet turns him away and he comes back again and he's turned away, and they go back and forth in this manner a few times, and the Prophet is obliged to carry the had punishment against this man. A result of it, he passes away. And the companions, they start to say that, did you see so-and-so and such, how he came to speak about what he had done? And the Prophet hears them speaking ill of this individual but says nothing. And as they move forward together as a group, they come upon the carcass of a donkey, and the Prophet says that, where is Fulan and Fulan, those who were speaking ill of that other person? And when they come forward, he says that, eat from this carcass, and they say, Ya Rasulullah, Mayta Ya Rasulullah, it's dead, that you told us it's haram for us to eat from the carcass of an animal. And the Prophet responds and says that it would be better for you to eat the flesh of this dead beast than consuming the back of your brother that you've been eating all day. On another occasion, Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu an, a companion who throughout the early years of Islam is persecuted based off of what his social standing is. He gets strapped to the blazing desert under the Arabian sun, and a boulder is put onto his chest over and over again until he is forced to recount this idea that there is only one God that he worships, and he doesn't give in. They would tie him up and drag him through the streets, making a spectacle of him at a time when the Muslims didn't have any power in Mecca, and nobody could do anything for him, because not only was he part of no family, and he had no lineage or ties or clan to protect him, his color of his skin was different from anybody else's. They treated him differently. And after Islam gets to a place where it's empowered, Bilal on one occasion is arguing with a companion by the name of Abu Dhar, who, as they are going back and forth, Abu Dhar says to Bilal out of anger, you are the son of a black woman. And the argument stops because they both realize what has been uttered. And when the Prophet hears it, he gets angry and he says, all of us are the children of a black woman, meaning Hagar, peace be upon her. What these instances tell us is that most definitely there were people in the community of the Prophet ﷺ who struggled with certain realities. Their own issues, their own anxieties, the manner in which the society around them treated them, and we see that the best of creation exerted the utmost of wisdom and understanding in how to deal with them. But what's even more important for us to understand as you're building out this idea of a new community, a new beginning, a place where people will come in from all walks of life. Just like the companion who drank alcohol was part of the Prophet's community. And the companion who committed zina was part of the Prophet's community. And the companion who was not Arab, the companion whose skin was black, was part of the Prophet's community. Every person that spoke ill of those people was also part of the Prophet's community. He didn't tell the people who said against the man who drank alcohol that you're no longer part of my ummah. He didn't say to the people who spoke out against the man who was committing zina, you are no longer part of my ummah. He didn't say to Abu Dhar, who was from amongst the more well-known companions, that you are not part of my community anymore. And it's an important part for us to be able to understand, because when you're trying to build community, you have to be able to build it through a lens of reality. You're not going to be able to create something if your ideals and values that are situated in the creation of this community are going to be things that aren't realistically tangible. You're going to always have people who do things that they shouldn't do. You're going to always have people who say things that they shouldn't say. You're going to have people who treat others poorly. You're going to have people who treat people great. You're going to have people who come from all experiences, all realities, all walks of life into your community. The idea is to build something that exists beyond them. Because despite those who were saying what they were saying, and even they were reprimanded, people were still coming to the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They weren't saying that these individuals who were talking down against those who were just struggling with the realities of their life are somehow going to dictate and brand for us what it means to be part of your community, Muhammad. And the worldview that he engaged was one that was based off of this understanding of inclusivity. But there was a strategy that was in place that needs to be able to be understood. And you got to be able to harness that for yourselves as you're building something. Because if you don't, you'll chase after something that doesn't even exist. There's no world that exists without pain. There's no world that exists without an absence of compassion. There's no world that exists without people who are arrogant and condescending and obnoxious. And if the reality of your community is based off of a reaction to those who exert a worldview like that, you are not defining what you actually are. You are simply still in reaction to somebody else. And you won't be able to reach your full potential. The uniqueness of gatherings that are divine in nature in comparison to our own gatherings is that those gatherings are uniquely poised based off of a principle of inclusivity. We are assessed and we are passed judgment upon not necessarily based off of who we let in, but more importantly, who it is that we are keeping out. And you think for yourself now, at your dinner tables, in your homes, your gatherings, the places that you would frequent with friends and families, who are the people that would come into those places? They could share a meal with you. They were able to participate in moments of celebration. People who were welcomed in, not given any kind of criteria based off of culture or country of origin or ethnicity or race or even gender. But they simply were just allowed in. And it's hard to find spaces like that. I work at a university. I also used to work at Princeton University. And to really understand what it is that I'm saying, think about how these places work. The only way Princeton is not because it's letting kids in who have a certain GPA and a certain SAT score and a certain set of extracurriculars, but it's mostly also about who it is that they're keeping out. And if they start to let everybody in, Princeton wouldn't be Princeton anymore. But the uniqueness of gatherings that are divine in comparison to gatherings that are human in nature is that you could have the best of creation and the most wretched of creation in God's house, and it doesn't take away from His divine majesty. Nobody says, why did you let that poor person into that temple, that synagogue, or that masjid? Why did you let that person who has that addiction into the musalla? A man comes into the Prophet's mosque and urinates in it. And people jump to get mad at him, and he says, no, let him be. Because those gatherings are meant to have a different frame in which they are engaged. I don't know what you want your community to be like. But I would say to you, based off of my own experiences, if you pursue something that says you will be all things to all people, it's not going to work. Because people have different needs and people have different realities, and we have to be able to understand that in some situations you can have a both and, but in some situations it has to be either or. And if you are not engaging it with a certain vision in place and you don't have a mission statement to actualize that vision, and you're just doing and doing but with no tangible goals at the end of it, at some point or another things are going to fall apart. My great-great-grandfather probably couldn't speak English. We're Kashmiri in background. My father was born in India before partition. He grew up in Lahore in Pakistan. My mother spent most of her life in a place called Peshawar. They immigrated here to the United States. Their grandparents were probably people who didn't engage religion in the same way that I did. If I find myself in a place where I say that I'm going to build something where everyone can feel comfortable, and my great-grandfather or great-great-great-grandfather walks in, and the sermon is not in a language that he understands, am I in a place where I am doing wrong by him? He would want it in a different language. Do you get what I'm saying? And this is where there has to be a strategy in place. Because he has a different need, and his need has to be met. And as much as I have a need to be met, it can't be at the cost of somebody else's need. And if my plan is such that I'm trying to really create this big tent without understanding the diversity that exists in the Muslim community, I'm going to start setting up something that is going to be much bigger than I can actually handle. And so maybe I wouldn't pitch myself as I'm all things for all people, but it's a space that I'm going to have a certain air of patience to grow with. When we started to build out our Islamic Center at New York University, and we took a different kind of shift in the way that it would run, the initial kind of criticisms that we got from people because we were doing things differently was that you're doing things in too much of a progressive way. You're doing things and you're too liberal. And you can come to our musalla, we have dividers up there, we have male space, female space, space where people interact with each other comfortably, but across the spectrum you have people engaging their deen in different ways. The issue was that it was something that was different, and unable to really deal with something that's new and unique and something that's potentially innovative, the criticisms that come in are the criticisms that come in. The question you all will have to ask yourself is, where is your source of validation stemming from? Are you going to be in a place where, again, you have a strategy and a plan, and you know that where you are today is going to inform where you will be 5 years and 10 years from now, and any person on the outside that's going to come and look in without really knowing what you have going on, but still offering their 2 cents because that's just what Muslims do, are they going to derail you from getting to where you want to end, or are you just going to keep answering to them? The same people who are our biggest critics now years later are the ones who are frequenting and coming. And where it comes from is building a plan but staying consistent. Understanding how legitimacy is established, it doesn't come overnight. People are able to establish themselves as authoritative in many different ways. And you can do that simply through your credentials, and you will be able to engage some segment of society. So if I stood in front of you and I said that I have a degree from one of the top institutions in the world and I'm an expert in this field based off of that credential, perhaps you might listen to me. But more likely than not, the way our community functions is not in a way where we look at really what the person represents in terms of their skills and credentials. We just look at what it is that they can actually turn to in terms of a track record. And as you build and you go with patience and consistency, you're going to see that different mindsets are going to come and go, but people are going to start to see what it is that you're actually about. That's going to be one of the most important factors. And it's going to always tie back to what it is that you're actually hoping to achieve, because if you don't know what it is that you want, you're not going to be able to actually stay consistent with it. At our center, the thing that we tell people these days, that we're really trying to promote and we're trying to sell is this idea of community. We found that there was a huge gap and a huge void for so many people because they felt as if they just didn't have a space to fit in. Beyond the 2,000 Muslim students that we have at NYU and our alumni and faculty and staff, there are now thousands of people who live in the New York area that come to our programs, our services, and our events, and they find their own way to come and engage based off of what they actually need. And I can tell you the factors that come into play that are most critical in that you all want to start thinking about for yourselves as individuals based off of your involvement in this project that is starting. And I pray that inshallah ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal blesses you immensely for taking this initiative, because it's one of the most important things that we need. What you're going to need on an individual basis for yourself is to first determine what it is that you actually want to do in terms of participation. You have to really assess for yourselves at this critical juncture how you will be engaged and involved, and not think solely about the immediate, but think more so about the long term. The 5 people who founded our center in the late 70s as students at New York University went through so many different struggles. And they couldn't even get people to come out to anything that they were doing. Decades later, they came back to NYU after they had on their own heard about things that were going on. And we invited them for the first time, for their first return back to an iftar dinner that we were hosting. And they came into a room that had about 300 people in it. And they were just shocked that there was this many Muslims at a gathering at a place where just 20 years, 30 years before, there was really nothing. And after I introduced them to everybody that was there, and they started to have conversations, a young woman who was a little late came in, and she said to me that, who are these people that everyone's crowding around? And so I introduced her to them, and while she was talking to them, she says that, you know, I've never met you before, and I don't know who you are, but you should know that every day there are hundreds, if not thousands of people who pray for you all, for what you started for us. And they're just in tears because they didn't realize how big it could have actually gotten and how much benefit could actually be derived. You don't have to look at numbers because this is a huge amount of people. But your dedication to the project is going to be something that's key. The other critical part for you is to be able to make a determination for yourself how in fact you're going to be a team player. That you can't have a community that's based off of individuals that are only going to look at things through the frame of a lens of individualism. But you have to be able to see how you will be able to work together, and whether or not you are in a space where your decision or your suggestion is actually being implemented, it's not about you, it's something that's much bigger than you. And what it will ensure is that you let yourself be heard, but you also listen to everyone else, and at the end, whatever the choice or decision is made in terms of the direction you're going, you stick with that because you're making a commitment to something that's much bigger. The Prophet ﷺ, before he passes away, one of the things that he does is he goes to the graves of those men who fell at the Battle of Uhud. And as he is standing there, he is making dua for these individuals, and he is praying and he is saying that you and I are going to be together again soon. And they had a different relationship, a different bond, because at a time when there wasn't so many of them, the Prophet starts a movement with a woman, an elderly man, and a child. And his farewell khutbah is given to 124,000 companions. And he goes and he stands in the front of the graves of dozens of men, and he says, we'll be together again, because they went through a struggle at the same time. These were the people who were there with him when they were at the grassroots and they were trying to build, and they didn't lose sight of it. They just kept going. More so on an individual basis, you want to understand how this can't be a space that is something that is run through just individuals, but people have to be interchangeable. You can't have something that will rely only on you all being here for it to exist. And if that's the way you're building it, you have to change it. Things have to be interchangeable, and the way you do that is to not look at things through a result-driven lens, but look at it through a process-driven lens. See how it is that you're actually getting to something, and understand why it's so much more important to see the way you got to the end as opposed to just the end itself, so that when someone else comes in, you can just plug them in right away. I worked at Princeton University for a year, and it was one of the most tense years of my life because I didn't know if I was going to end up in New York, where I just love to be. And when I worked at Princeton, I was about 24 years old. It was really crazy being there because I got into Princeton and I got tons of letters from alumni saying that we don't want Islam at Princeton. We don't want Sharia at Princeton. And on the other end, the people who were my colleagues were like the founder of Amazon.com and Toni Morrison and the person who's responsible for the resurgence of China's economy. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And when I got there, I gave my first khutbah, and there was 6 people at Jummah. And we were in a room that was pretty much like this. And think about giving a khutbah to 6 people. They weren't even sitting next to each other. There's like someone here and someone there. You can't even look. It's just weird, like talking to a gathering like that. A young woman wanted to take her shahada, and there was nobody for me to invite to be there to just celebrate. So I had to take her to New York because that's where I knew people were. And the dynamic was so crazy. It wasn't something that I was used to, and it was, how do we figure out how to build something here? Especially in this critical and crucial place, because people at Princeton University are going to become senators and prime ministers and CEOs. They have to think with an air of consciousness about how they can be empowered by their Islam. It's an important place for people to really connect to their faith. So we did a bunch of things, and at the end of the year, the last khutbah I gave had about 70 people at it. And a young woman took her shahada the last week that I was there, and the room was filled with people who were from Princeton. When I got my offer full-time from New York University and things were moving forward, I had to tell them at Princeton University that I couldn't stay there anymore. And when I went in and I sat down with the dean, I said, you know, I feel really terrible. I feel really, really horrible. And he said, why? And I said, because the community here has grown so much, and they're doing so much, and they're really engaged, and they're really active, and it's something that wasn't here before I came, and now it's something that if I'm gone, I don't know what's going to happen. And the dean said to me, Khalid, if you leave, we will find somebody to replace you. And it was probably the most important thing I ever heard, and I'm so grateful I heard it when I was younger, because it helped me to realize that my engagement is not something that's about me, but it's an opportunity from Allah. And with an air of humility, I have to be able to understand that if I'm able to do something, there's probably so many more people who can do it. But the other thing that it helped me understand when I revisited that situation many years later was that it doesn't make sense to build something that can only exist if one person is there and when they leave, it's gone. And you have to be in a place where you don't build something that is reliant upon individuals, because life experience can change that reality, and people will start to have a need fulfilled based off of this work. You owe it to them, and you owe it to yourself to ensure its longevity beyond you. So how do you really build that sense of institutionalization in this strategy? Most of you in this room are probably professionals. What you have to think about as you build this strategically is, what are actually the resources that you have at your disposal today? How are you implementing those resources? And then in the long term, what is it that you want to achieve in terms of milestones, and how are you dedicating yourself here? The biggest issues that Muslim institutions have in this country, whether they're community-based organizations or not, is that they don't have a vision, they don't have a mission statement, and they don't have the financial muscle or stability to sustain what it is that they want to do. Our center these days runs dollar for dollar on fundraising and donations. And in a given year, we have to raise about $350,000 to $400,000 to meet the needs of our growing community. If there are 20 of you in this room right now, theoretically, there's about 200 or so that are just like you who would want to be here, who couldn't come just because of the time and the day. And what you have to think about in terms of the empowerment of your community is not how do we just create this space, but individually, how do I commit to the sustainability of the project? And the sustainability is going to go hand in hand with the financial stability of it. You might not make tons of money, but you have to be able to think within that strategy, how will there be a financial strategy as well? And if you want to see this grow, how are you creating mechanisms by which revenue will come in, whether that's through fundraising and donations, to ensure that things are going to grow? 20 of you want to eat pizza for lunch today, it might cost you $80, right? $100, $150. When you have 200 people in the room that you have to feed, and you have to give water to, and you have to provide plates for, and you have to have garbage bags to clean up after them, what are you going to do? When you have, inshallah, 2,000 people from Long Island who are regularly coming to the Lighthouse initiative, how will you sustain a project and a space for them? You have to, in your own individual commitment, think about what support means in terms of in-kind support as well as financial support. And then be smart. What we had at the IC early on was not anything other than the most important thing, which was well-intentioned individuals who had amazing skills that were willing to offer it for the growth of the community in the absence of funds and finances that would let us go out and hire people. You don't know how to be smart with money, that's totally fine. In your community, you have people who understand finance, they have their MBAs, they're investors. Go to them, they'll take your $5,000 and potentially they'll turn it into $6,000. If you think that's not that big of a deal, think about it in the frame of what it will actually cost you today to run this for 20 people and how much it will be more of a comfort that you have an extra $1,000 at the end of the year to do this as many more times. You want to tap into the potential of the people who are around you. And what the Prophet ﷺ does with his community is that he empowers them to understand that each one of them has something to offer. Each one of them has a place where they belong and something that they can uniquely use from themselves to really bring benefit to the community on a whole. He knows where to place people. He knows where people should be. And what he does for them at a time when there is really nothing that's going to be so crucial is that he helps them to maintain their sense of confidence and their sense of hope and their sense of understanding that things are going to get better. Khabab ibn Arad comes to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, why don't you make dua for us? Why don't you ask Allah to make things easy for us? And Umar ibn al-Khattab on one occasion sees Khabab ibn Arad with his shirt off. He sees his back bare and is covered with blisters and scars. And he says, Ya Khabab, how did this happen? And Khabab says that in the early days of Islam, when we were heavily persecuted by the Meccans, they would torture us and they would force me to lay on a bed of flaming coals until the blood from my back extinguished the flames. And the scars were the result of it. And Khabab is now coming to the Prophet, why aren't you praying for us to make things easy for us? And the Prophet says, Ya Khabab, don't say such things. Ya Khabab, don't say such things because there were those who came before you who went through much worse and they endured it. The Prophet is not telling Khabab to not complain. But what do you think he's going to really tell his friend when they're building from the ground up that, yeah, we don't have what it takes? That we can't do this? that we don't have it within us, that we're going to fail? He says, don't say it. We can do this. Don't say it. We will achieve. Don't say it. We will be able to take on the odds, and we will get to a place where this won't be our reality. Gratitude and appreciation and achieving and congratulating will lift the morale of your professional volunteer group in a way that will be so critical, they will just keep coming. Think about how many times people have thanked you for things that you have done. Think about how many times anybody has ever said to you, I'm proud of you, you did a good job. Think about how they celebrate achievement with you in comparison to how many spaces and how many places you've been where all it seems is people are talking about what it is that you do that is wrong and where it is that you are flawed. The Prophet asks Abdullah ibn Mas'ud the question about the Quran. He gets the answer right. The Prophet pats him on his chest and says that, good job, mabruk to you for this knowledge that you have. Mu'adh ibn Jabal is going to go and speak on behalf of the community to other communities, and the Prophet asks him question after question about what it is that he will do when he is found to look for answers. And as he responds to the Prophet's questions and he gets them right, the Prophet pats him on the back and says, you're doing great. You got to build these little things in, especially at this point in time. Because the whole point of me building a space where I feel like I fit in and belong is a space where I feel like I fit in and belong. And in the absence of wealth, in the absence of resources, in the absence of millions of dollars, you don't want to lose people just because you didn't simply say to them, thank you for being here. We really appreciate everything that you're doing. You found benefit in today, thank the people who organized it. You feel like it's something that's doing something well for you, get over the awkwardness and be in a place where you understand hadith, where the Prophet says things to the effect of that spreading salam amongst yourself will increase the love amongst you. And let that be the foundation of the community that you're building. When you want to really assess the needs and understand the strategy and what it is that's going to be the vision of this place, you have to be in a place where you're open to assessing and listening to those who are going to come from different experiences than your own. When we build out programs now at our center, we try to do it with an air of patience. Everybody comes and everybody wants to say that, I think this is what we should be doing. We listen, and if we're able to do it and it makes sense, we try. But if we can't, it's not that we won't. Maybe we'll do it later. But where we have benefited the most is by bringing people in and actually just hearing their story and hearing their narrative. Think how it is that the Prophet of God is able to say to a companion who comes and says, Ya Rasulullah, is it okay if I kiss my wife while I'm fasting? And to one he says yes, and another comes and says, Ya Rasulullah, is it okay if I kiss my wife while I'm fasting? And to him he says no. How does he get to the point where he is so attuned to the strengths and weaknesses of his companions that he is able to make Islam so relevant to them on a specific level that the same question that he is being posed from different individuals is rendering different answers because he knows where they are coming from? Our model is a model that we say has multiple entry points. And our space is not a space that we define as a purely religious space. Definitely we don't define it as a purely secular space, but we define it as a space that exists somewhere in between, where we let people come as they are, as long as we understand that we're letting Islam be what it is. And the idea of having multiple entry points is to cater to the diversity of community that we have. Diversity in terms of culture, race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic reality, but also just life experience. You have people who across the board are just feeling a very subjective sense of pain, and when Islam is not made to be something that is looked through a frame of reality, we leave people really hanging. So when we build out a program, we gather information and collect data very heavily through one-on-one interviews of people. And we ask them to share their story with us. We ask them to share their experiences with us. We ask them to tell us their ideas and their thoughts. I've had grown men who are in their late 30s, early 40s, sitting in my office crying because they say that no one has ever asked us what we think. No one has ever asked us our opinion. No one has really ever thought that we had needs that were not being fulfilled. And this is one of the most beautiful things of the space that we've created, is been able to bring light to realities that don't necessarily get addressed. We are able to talk about and also start to lay a foundation to deal with issues of abuse and violence and all kinds of problems. Depression, suicidal ideation, people who find themselves in a place where they just want somebody to listen to what's going on in their life, but they're just met with dead end after dead end. And pain is subjective. It doesn't have to be somebody who is in a place where they're experiencing domestic violence at home, but somebody walks in and says that I just lost my job. I just failed an exam. The girl that I like just told me that she doesn't like me anymore. Every situation is serious because it's serious for that person and that individual, but having the institution to address it enables us to create a place of empowerment where people can understand that despite what it is that's happening with the reality of life, there's still a space that they can be at. There's still a space that they can kind of come to. The first program that we built out, aside from our 9 student clubs that we have and our alumni group and whatever, was something that we started to build when we made a conscious decision to create and provide space for those who had no affiliation to our university. We have many who didn't go to NYU, who aren't at NYU, who have nothing to do with NYU, who come. Because we found that there was a void of something like that, and we needed to be able to decide whether or not we wanted to be the place that would start to meet and fill that void. So the first group that we started to serve and provide an entry point for was our convert population, where we just had so many people who were coming to take their shahada. These days at our center, probably on average every week, there's 1 or 2 people who are converting, whether it's in front of everybody at Jummah or it's a more private thing in my office, but there's a lot of people. And then there's many people who end up there because they come from places where they just didn't feel like they were really understood, and now they wanted to have a space where they felt like they could still grow. And we saw it as a critical place to start. And so what did we do? I reached out to 50 or 60 people who were converts in the community, and I brought them in, and I said, why did you become Muslim? What was it like when you converted to Islam? What were things that were good? What were things that were hard? How was it in lifestyle transition? What was it like dealing with family? What were things that you wish that you had? What were things that you wish nobody would ever have to go through? And then we built out a program after doing those interviews for about 3 or 4 months. None of this cost any money. We did it through volunteers. All it cost us was time to sit down and listen to somebody. We took their narratives and we analyzed them for common trends and themes. There was a process by which we got to the program that we got to. And then we had a soft launch of the program that we now call Conversations, and we put a little T in parentheses after the R. And it started with something just simple as this, where I would invite people to my apartment and we would have brunch together once a month. And then it built into something else, and there's other ideas and things that we have, but it came from something. There was a process to it. We did the next year a similar group for professionals in our community, and the way we identified professionals was by saying people who are just 23 or I think 25 and older. And we went through the same process of data collection, and this time the pool was much bigger. And in about 5 months since the time it started, that group grew to about 1,000 people on its own. And every single program we had was just person after person wanting to come in because there was really no place for them to go. And in the data we collected, one of the things that we found that was in common with our professionals group as well as our converts group, the most common thing that came across in either group was that they just felt really alone. They felt as if there wasn't a place where they were understood. That they would go to the workplace and people were great and they were really nice, but there were just life experiences that they weren't really their own. I wasn't spending the weekend hanging out with people, getting drunk and going to parties and clubbing. I wasn't in a place where it's nice for you to tell me that, yeah, you finally went out with that girl, but I'm not doing that. And I'm not being judgmental of you, but that doesn't speak to conversations that I want to have. And when I try to go and find solace in the masjid and I don't find a space there for me, I don't really know where else to go. Because there's no place for me to find individuals who are like-minded, who have gone through what I've gone through. So where do I end up? And as I'm getting older, I'm not 15 anymore. I'm 20, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50. I'm not trying to go out and make friends. I'm not trying to go out and be like a teenager again. And I just need to find somebody who gets me. It was the same thing with our convert population. And it was something that we saw in people, regardless of their age, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their level of observance and practice, regardless of any other factors, Muslims were really, really lonely. And they needed a space where they just found a different sense of solace and they could find community. The third project that we started to collect data on last year that is still in a soft phase is a women's initiative. And in the coming year, the next program that we're hoping to build out is a Muslim artist collective. And every year we're hoping to just create another entry point. But our institutional memory is in a group that was founded 35 years ago. And about 8 or 9 years ago is when we made a critical shift from a student organization to a professional group, and only as of recent have we really started to build things out. It took us many years to get to where we are right now, and there's still a lot of room for growth. It helps, though, having a plan in mind so you know where it is that you're going to. And I only say this to you because you are starting in a place where we were at only about 15 years ago. And you can get to a place where it can be even bigger than you imagine, and then you start to fill other voids and other gaps. But it just depends on what it is that you actually want to do and what it is that you're hoping to achieve. Be smart and strategic and create gatherings where people can come and feel as if they're being listened to, and regardless of whether or not it goes in the specific direction that they want, they still feel as if they have a place where they can participate. And it'll be necessary to understand the diversity of experience and be ready to understand what it is that you can do and what it is that you can't do, because as people come, they're going to come with things that you might not potentially be able to deal with, but you have to then see in the long term, how as a community are you responsible? Community responsibility is factored into our Sharia. The concept of a fardul ayn is an individual obligation. I can't pray your prayer. I can't fast your fast. You got to do it yourself. You don't want to do it. You got to deal with that. But as a community, we are then responsible for things, and we move from beyond the category of individual obligation to communal obligation, what is called the fardul kifaya. So an example that's used more often than not is that if somebody passes away in the community and nobody knows how to perform the funeral prayer for that person, the entire community bears the burden of the sin. But if one of us knows how to wash that body and shroud that body and pray the janazah for that body, then all of us are lifted of the obligation. As people come into your community with their needs and their realities, they will have things that need to be met. If you don't have a plan, you will be overwhelmed by it. If there is a woman in your community who is suffering from abuse and there is not a resource to turn her towards, and she has to live in the reality of confinement in a place where her home is not secure and she is being mistreated, and we know this is happening, most definitely as a community we have a responsibility to be able to provide a resource for her so that she can live her life. And if as a community we are not meeting that responsibility, all of us bear the burden of it. Because just like you and I deserve a place to fit in and belong, so too does that woman. And when Allah tells us that the believing men and women are supporters of each other, we got to really understand what that means. I want you to now think about this, though, in the frame of what we're talking about. We had our professionals get together for a meet and greet, just dinner at the lounge of my apartment building. There was about 200 of them there. And I said to them that I want to tell you about a woman who came to see me just a week ago. Her husband was physically abusive of her and emotionally negligent of her. She has 2 young kids. She finds herself in a place where she got married at a young age. She has no work experience. She has no degree. She has no resume. She came and she sat and she mustered up the strength and the courage to leave from this man who was not honoring her rights. And because there was no resource for her to go to from within the Muslim community in New York that has 600,000 to 1 million people, she went to the local government-operated shelter. And what she met there was even worse than what she had at home. Drugs and prostitution and people trying to steal her belongings, and she's there with 2 little girls. And so she comes into a place where she's now sitting, and she says that every day when people have left from my home, I just go and sit in the park near my house and I just cry. Because what else can I do? So I said to this group of people, breaking them into groups of 5 and 10, what do we do for this woman? We who are in this room, who are doctors and lawyers and academics and scientists and nonprofit workers and people who are entrepreneurs and people who have so much talent and so much potential, what do? When we came back as a group, a couple of people said, we should have a Facebook campaign for her. Let's raise money for her. Let's try to get her to a place where we can do something for her. I said, that's fine. But then the people who really got it started to say, we have to think how we can build a shelter for our women. We have to think how we can use our wealth to build out the institutions that don't exist. We have to think and understand that this woman represents probably thousands who have nowhere to turn to, and they're just going through the prison of their life because there's no alternative. You can endeavor to do that. If you really think about the individuals who represent the silent majority of the Muslim community, their skills, their talents, their credentials, their resources, their wealth, everything that they encompass and embody. We don't need any more masjids. We don't. We don't need any more masjids. We need space that meets the needs of other realities in our community. And you think how you can endeavor to build that out. One of the next projects we're hoping to build in the Islamic Center is a community trust that will be based out of a New York City foundation that will use zakah as a revenue stream. When we estimated what just the zakah was of our Jummah prayer service, that any given week has 300 to 600 people, we got numbers off of our estimations of millions of dollars. And if we were able to build something that took even 20, 30, 50% of that wealth, and it channeled it into a place where we then strategically started to empower and get wealth to those who were really in need in our community and build out the institutions that would bring benefit to society and could be from amongst those categories that we could give our zakah to, none of our women would be stuck in this place. They wouldn't be in a place where they had to deal with that kind of nonsense. They wouldn't have to go to the masjid where the person was living in this place that they've never dealt with life before, and all their information is abstract, and the only thing that resonates in their head is that oh, the most hated of the permissible things in God's eyes is divorce, it's still permissible. I had a woman who came to see me who said, I'm going to leave Islam because every single masjid I go to tells me I have to stay with this man who is just treating me and my daughter like we're nothing. And when I called up the sheikh who was giving her the advice that was giving her, I said, what are you doing? And he said, what do you want me to do? Just grant a divorce to every woman who comes to see me that says that her husband is beating her? I said, yeah, what do you mean? But that's what it is. There's no semblance of reality there. And you all represent the people who can change that dynamic. And all of it is relevant. This past week at our center, we hosted a mayoral candidate forum of people running for New York City mayor. And of the 10 candidates, 7 of them came because they recognized a certain power and clout that they needed to come speak to our community. We wouldn't be able to fill up the seats and let people think that we are a body of influence, that we can affect the polls and we will come out to vote and we harness the wealth to run your campaign if our community members didn't feel good inside and empowered enough to believe that they could actually make a difference. If they didn't think that there was anything that they had to do and they didn't feel confidence. And that comes from building it out with a different sense of strategy and a different sense of purpose. I was so happy when I got an email that said that you all are trying to build this. And I don't say that with any sense of disingenuity. I really, really am truly, truly so proud of you. Because these are the kind of things we need to do. Don't let your process be something that is seeking validation from someone else. You saw a gap, you saw that you have the talent to fill it, then go out and fill it. Let yourself be the leaders that we are absent of in our communities, and you go out and you do it because it's the right thing to do. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he finds himself in a place where he has wealth and he emancipates a woman by the name of Zunaira and another by the name of Lubayna. Zubayna was the slave of Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl beat Zunaira so much that she actually lost her eyesight. Lubayna was the servant of Umar ibn al-Khattab before he became Muslim. Umar used to beat this woman so much that when he would stop, he would say, don't think I have sympathy for you. I'm just tired. When I get my strength back, I'm going to continue to do this. Abu Bakr sets them free, and when he sets them free, his father says that, why are you spending your money on these women who won't be able to do anything for you? If you're going to set slaves free, set some young, strong men free who will get your back when you are in a moment of need. Abu Bakr says that that's not why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm not doing this in expectation for anything in return. I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's going to be what's most pleasing to Allah. Let that be your end point. A relationship with the divine. Harness the best and brightest of our community and be smart in what it is that you're going to do. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal will bless this endeavor immensely. And you will become a place and a space where even if only 20 people come to it, you're changing the lives of 20 people. That's not a joke. And those 20 can go out and endeavor to do things that can be so amazing. And it'll make it something that, inshallah ta'ala, will weigh very heavy on your scales. Be patient with it. Be smart with it. And commit yourself to it in every sense of the word. You want to understand where you want to end up and really critically how you are going to actually get there. This is supposed to happen every month. All of you try your best to come here every month. Once you get things rolling and you get things going, build in time where you can debrief and you can understand how do we make something better? Lisa said that we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in humanitarian aid. Where it comes from is not anything different than what we've done for years. We just constantly revisit and say what we're doing now that's going well, how can we do it even in a better way? We professionalize it. We make it something that really is just building and building upon itself. And then people will come and they will change the dynamic. Our students at NYU, in 3 months, by themselves raised $100,000 for humanitarian aid. Can you think of any Muslim students that do that in the country? 2 months before that, at an iftar dinner at our center, as people that nobody thought could really bring any kind of benefit, we raised $250,000 for the people of Syria. And it didn't come from people giving $50,000 or $100,000. But the people in our community took little plastic bins and put them on streetcar vendors. And they gave 10 and 100 and 1,000. The largest gift that we got was probably $10,000. When you empower a community and you let every single person believe that they have something to offer, they will offer it. And when you understand these hadith that we hear over and over, and you get empowered by them, and you love for your brother what you love for yourself, you will understand that you are uniquely poised to be able to do things that others can't do. Because there are people who are able to do so much that you brought in that nobody else was willing to bring in because they couldn't look past just their own stereotypes and their own superficial sense of what somebody else actually is. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal will bless you immensely. If I can help you in any way, shape, or form, feel free to let me know. If you all are ever in New York City, feel free to come by. We would love to have you there. And some of you we haven't seen there in a long time, and you owe us a visit. But we want to be able to benefit from each other. And this is the last thing that I'll say. You do not exist in a vacuum. The whole point of us building a model that works somewhere and it has grown is so that we can now learn from each other. And as we grow, part of the strategy has to be how we can maintain a relationship so that we're even doing bigger and better. And we're not isolated, and we're not able to help empower. So you let me know what I can do for you. I'll definitely let you know what you can do for me. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll start to slowly change some of the circumstances that we have and not let anybody feel as if they have to go through the realities of this world on their own. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and protect us. May He bless us with knowledge that benefits us. May He bless us with a tawfiq to understand and implement that knowledge into our daily lives. And may He guide and bless us all. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Takbir, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions written, you can pass them up, but, or you can just ask them, I suppose. I don't need to moderate.
Yeah.
I would like to learn more about this trust that you're talking about really a way of bringing together the resources, I guess I guess you could say monetary resources for the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Like if you have a specific model or what steps are being taken so far to really bring it.
Yeah. Well, I think we have so much talent in our community that really understands finance, but we don't tap into them as best as we can, right? And the endowment model is a model that exists within Islamic history, really forever. And we want to think about how you're financially stabilizing but also empowering your own community and then in turn communities around you. The idea with the Muslim Community Trust that we're hoping to build out based in Manhattan would be something that is not just about doing good works, but also thinking about other factors and variables that are residual benefit. if we as a Muslim community are able to endeavor towards building sound institutions, and they are not in a place where they're in need, it's going to also be something that benefits us just in terms of our public image and PR, right? You walk into, a local shelter, you walk into an orphanage, you walk into these places, and there's a plaque on the wall that says, this is made possible by the generous contribution of the ICNYU Muslim Community Trust. The models that we're exploring are unique in that we have to be able to keep things Sharia compliant. If we use zakah as a revenue stream, then zakah has to be paid out per annum. So if you gave me $1,000 in zakat money, right, I can't make money off of your zakah. Like that $1,000 has to go to someone. Do you get what I'm saying? And it has to go within the time span that your zakah is due, right? And this is an important thing to think about because financial empowerment is so important, and indigenizing our financial giving is something that's important too, because many of the times when we're giving our zakah elsewhere, we're not necessarily benefiting from zakah in the fullest sense of the word, right? The Prophet knows who's in need in his community, right? He knows where they're at. When the companion comes into the masjid and the khutbah is being given and the Prophet tells him to stand and pray 2 rak'ah, many of us will use that as an evidence to say you should pray 2 rak'ah before you sit down in the musalla, right? You have complementing hadith to that situation that gives us further context to it, where that person who was made to stand was somebody who didn't really have so much. And as he stood, every companion saw that he was there, and you could tell that he was in a place where he needed some help. The Prophet was able to convey that to his community without getting up and saying that that person needs some help, somebody give him some money, right? But he knows who's in need, and he knows how to fulfill their needs, right? It's part of that sunnah that we are understanding where the reality is amongst our population. There's many different endowment models that one could think of, and there's so many different ways that you can invest your wealth, right? You can invest it in real estate. You can invest it in any kind of business. It's crazy to think how many of the companions were actually entrepreneurs, right? If you really think about the companions of the Prophet of God, so many of them were people who were businessmen. And they were able to see things in many different ways, right? Abdurrahman ibn Auf was a merchant. He went to Medina, and the Prophet was pairing people up with the Medinese, and Abdurrahman said, that's great, I appreciate what you're offering, just tell me the way of the market, I'm going to set up my stall, right? Abu Bakr is appointed the caliph, and there's no salary affixated for him. The people see him going to the market, and he says, what are you doing? I got to make money so my family can eat. He knows how to be a businessman. So many of them are entrepreneurial, and it's built into their understanding of their Islam, right? The financial stability of it can be something that is really easy to harness if you think about it now. There's a group in DC that's called Triple IT, and I was speaking at a fundraiser in DC 3 or 4 years ago with the president of the foundation, and this foundation during the Bush era had its assets frozen, and some of the people who ran it were literally, their houses were raided, and it really threw them off. But they had started an endowment like decades ago, right? And because of that scrutiny, they didn't really spend so much of their wealth, and they were now in a place where their endowment had grown considerably. So while I'm sitting there talking to him, I said to him, how much do you guys get in a return on this endowment that you've set up? And he said, $6 or $7 million a year. And I said, even if you're returning 10%, that means your endowment base is $70 million. That's crazy, right? And they're giving wealth to a local food pantry. They're providing wealth to, a bunch of different shelters, right? Because they had an idea years before, and it grew into something that was amazing, right? If you guys pool your wealth together and you put it into investments that make sense, it's just going to grow itself, right? And in 10 years, you're going to be far ahead of where you are.
In Boston, where Suhaib Webb is the imam, they use really heavily the people who are coming out of MIT and Harvard, and they're studying, in different fields there. And you have people who are part of the community that have really benefited from the community, that are so generous, they just keep adding to the endowment, and they're growing it very purposefully. Suhaib Webb told me last time I was hanging out with him that somebody gave them like a bunch of apartments to just be a waqf for the masjid, right? But that's how you build like residual income, right? So I buy an apartment, the rent from it goes to the masjid. The 96th Street Mosque had an empty plot of land next to it for years, and they didn't really know what to do with it. Somebody came in with the idea that said, why don't we give that to a developer? They built like a 45-story structure. The bottom 2 floors were their free like school. The next 20 were places that were for rent, and the top 20 were apartments that were for sale, and a percentage of the income that was generated was coming back to the masjid, right? That's an endowment. Like, that's how it works. Don't let yourself get lost in a place where people will get to and be like, well, 96th Street is just not a fun place to be. That's not the point, right? Like, it's not. They're doing something that makes sense, and you got to focus on that, because our reaction can't be to justify why we have a shortcoming. And we can so easily justify our passivity by being able to point out where somebody else is flawed, right? They set up something that makes sense. Perhaps you can't implement it directly here, but you can start to lay the groundwork for it. All you put your money together, and rather than donating something that's in an expendable way, right, be smart about it, put it into some kind of investment, and just watch it grow. And then as you grow in your professions, you start to put more and more of your wealth into something so that it starts to grow even more and more. Does that make sense? And definitely you have people that you know who could help articulate that in a more sensible and sound way. The tough thing is going to be sitting in a room and doing like the tedious work, right? Where you actually have to like sit down and think and, build things in a way that makes sense, right? Are you going to be like a nonprofit, right? Are you going to incorporate yourself and really set up like bylaws and all this kind of stuff? It is so boring to do. But somebody has to do it so that you're not caught off guard later on, right? If I came to you tomorrow and I said, I want to give you $10,000, who do I write that check out to? I'm going to write it out to Lisa Shah, and she's going to throw it in her bank account? You're not a college MSA. You want to do something that's serious, like treat it serious in every other way possible, right? And set it up from the ground level in a way that it's done as best as it can be. Do you get what I'm saying? You don't want to be in the place where, okay, now the situation arises, we have to figure it out. But preemptively, especially when numbers are small, because you will get a ton of people that come in down the line, and they will be so annoying, and they will tell you everything that you should be doing, and you'll be like, you've only been here for 5 minutes, shut your mouth, right? But it won't work. They're just going to keep talking. The more you build now, and the more that is concrete, the more that it's going to actually stay in the vision that you have, right? And this is where other groups are really, really smart. So if I own Pepsi, I sell soda. I don't sell computers. Why not? Because that's not what I do. And if somebody sits down and says to me, hey, you know what? You have a great brand. Why don't you start making laptops? I'd be like, no, like that's not what my business is, right? If you want to be in the business of building community, then you build community. And if you don't know what your vision is and your strategy is, you won't be able to get people to the point where they're going to actually want to financially empower it. Everything goes hand in hand. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What else?
Well, if not, let's thank Khalid. I think we all, and I speak for everyone when I say, we really benefited from the
Thank you
talk.
for having me.
Definitely.